Helen here with Eyes on the Game, and I'm here being joined by Duco Promotions, David Higgins. First off, great to see you here just a few weeks out before the big fight, Joseph Parker, Alexander Flores. First off, can you kind of give your thoughts on that fight?
Well, look, I think it's a critical fight for Joseph Parker. Obviously, he was former WBO world champion. He defended that belt a couple of times. Took a couple of losses against Anthony Joshua and then Dillon White. There's a bit of controversy. First man to take Joshua the distance. The ref intervened a bit, headbutt against White. No excuses though. The fact is Joseph is coming off 2 losses. A third against an opponent like Flores is possibly career-ending. So it's Joseph's most important fight to date. He must beat Alexander Flores. He must beat him emphatically, because if he were to lose to Flores, he needs to go back to the drawing board, take 6 months off and consider his future. So it's a very important fight for Joseph Parker. And Flores is no mug. I mean, he's 18 odd fights, 17 wins, 15 by knockout. He can punch. He's got a better knockout percentage than Joseph Parker. And I've met him. He's a lovely guy, and he's training the house down. And so we have a real fight on our hands, and it's the biggest event of the summer in our home country, New Zealand.
Now, talk about him being able to go back home and fight this fight on home soil.
For him, it's it's a happy time and a happy thing, because he's been plying his trade around the world for a few years, and him and I have been flying all over the place. We've been to the UK. UK's almost become like a home market. The fans love Joseph in the UK, but all that travel, he's got a young family, 2 babies, and so he was really keen to fight at home. It might have been easier for me to make this fight for Joe a comeback fight in the UK, but he said he'd really like to fight at home. First home fight in 2 years, might be the only home fight in 4 years, but for Joe to go home at summertime with Christmas, to have his young daughter Elizabeth at the fight, it's a special occasion really, but that doesn't take away from the fact he's got a very important job to do to take very seriously, and he has to win that fight.
Now, speaking of Alexander Flores, what intrigued you, about him to match him up with Joseph?
Look, we have matchmakers we work with, and it's and my job's quite tricky. It was one of the trickier fights to put together, because if I get a useless opponent who's no good, I'm not going to sell any tickets or TV or sponsorship and lose a whole lot of money, and no one's going to take it seriously, and Joseph will learn nothing. Then again, to get a big name is difficult, because even though Joseph took a loss to Joshua and White, he nearly beat White, nearly knocked him out, took Joshua distance. So people are wary of Joseph. They know that he's a formidable boxer, and so they want huge money. So it was a bit of a catch-22, where we have to find someone who credible, hungry, young, looks the part, has, a nearly a perfect record, but also has the courage to come to New Zealand, Joseph's hometown, and fight for the right amount of money that's achievable. So credit to Alexander Flores, because, not a lot of people turn down the opportunity to go to Joseph's hometown. They want silly money, so what that tells you, Alexander Flores is backing himself. He's coming to win. It's not about the money. He thinks he can beat Joseph Parker and make his name.
But that does bring added pressure for Joseph, because he is, an unknown name, and Joseph's still, I believe, in the WBC rankings, still in the top 5. So, don't you see it kind of as it could be a win-lose situation?
Oh, totally. You've summed it up perfectly. It does bring added pressure. If Joseph wins, he's still not quite back. Still, we'd be seeking a rematch with Dillon White, or maybe Chisora if Chisora wins that fight. If Joe loses, he's lost to someone that doesn't really have a name. So you've summed up perfectly. That's why the stakes are so high, and it's a very important fight for Joseph Parker.
And what did you think of Alexander Flores? You did touch up on his record, but he has been stopped by Charles Martin.
Yeah, so he took that Charles Martin fight at, I think, 2 weeks' notice. Martin's a southpaw, tricky, and he wasn't prepared, and he regrets taking it. But I think if you look at that loss in that context, Take that away, he's got a perfect record. He's a family man, he's clean living, he's actually smart, nice guy, I liked him. He's hungry, he's coming to win the fight. And I've fed this back to Joseph Parker. You can't take anything for granted. Look at what happened with Tyson and Buster Douglas. When you take that opponent for granted, they're the ones sometimes that get over and, change history. So we know how important it is, and we just hope if Joseph performs at his best, he should be able to put Flores away. It would be good to also get him an emphatic victory, perhaps by stoppage.
Yes, and because he is looking to bounce back and redeem himself from the back-to-back losses. His fight against Dillon White, what did you think of that? And the headbutts, did you?
Well, I was sitting front row ringside in between Barry Hearn and Eddie Hearn, the White's promoters, and we were talking throughout the fight. And in the first round or two, Joseph was all over Dillon White. We all acknowledge that. He was, win the fight. Then there was that sickening headbutt to the back of the head. Now, the three of us didn't know it was a headbutt. We were confused. We thought it might have been a punch. The referee called it a punch. And so Joseph was stripped point. Had it been called a headbutt, the fight would have been a draw. But more importantly, for the ensuing 4 rounds, Joseph was all over the place. He didn't look right. And Eddie and Barry and I were saying something's not right with Joseph Parker here. And after the fight, Joseph explained that headbutt caused him to lose all equilibrium and balance. He said it was like the fight was in slow motion for 4 rounds. He was just struggling to survive. So, he might have won a couple of those rounds had it not been for the headbutt. It isn't excuses, this is fact. And then towards the end of the fight, when he got his balance back, he nearly knocked Dillon White out. Had there been another 30 seconds, he would have. So it was a bittersweet fight for us because Joseph could have so easily won it had circumstances been different. But that is boxing. There are no excuses. You take the good with the bad. What it tells us, if they fight again, we think Joseph probably wins. And to back that up, Dillon White's talking about fighting everyone except Joseph Parker. You don't see Dillon White asking for a rematch. Dillon knows. He knows there's unfinished business. He knows he only just won that fight. And there's a bullseye on Dillon White's forehead. And at some point, he's going to have to step up and prove he can beat Joseph Parker conclusively, because that was not conclusive.
And very well said. But speaking of the headbutt, did I read correctly that leading up into this fight, you will be having MRI brain scans done?
I've decided there was a bit of a tragedy in New Zealand boxing recently where a corporate boxer passed away, say in the UK it's compulsory to MRI scan boxers before they get in the ring. In New Zealand, it's a bit like the Wild West. So I've made it my own decision that I'm going to MRI scan every fighter on my cards going forward, and it's expensive. It costs over $1,000 per person. But if anything, any tragedy happened on my card, or I'd want to put my hand in my heart and say I did everything I could as a promoter to make it the safest possible environment. So I think it's the right thing to do, and that's what we're doing. I think it's the first time in New Zealand history that every fight has been MRI scanned.
Yeah, I respect that, and the fact that you care so much about the fighter's health, which leads me to kind of bring this up and ask you for your opinion, because Golden Boy Promotions, they had their first MMA card, and some people were, kind of questioning Oscar De La Hoya because Chuck Liddell, being 48 years old, I don't know if you read about or watched the fight at all, but what do you think of, maybe him letting someone like that go back in the cage?
Yeah, no, I didn't see it, but someone who's expert in fight sport and boxing told me about it with horror and shock. And the opinion of this person was that Liddell should not have been. They told me that Liddell had already suffered various knockouts, and at that age, to put him in the ring, it's just about money. Like he's at the end of his career and that. So, the expert talking to me felt it was entirely inappropriate, the outcome you could foresee, and it was just basically dishing out brain damage for cash,
yes,
which is pretty cynical.
So do you think they shouldn't even have let him step in there, right?
In my opinion, they probably shouldn't have let him step in there.
Yeah, and I mean, it'll be interesting to see, what happens moving forward. I do know that Liddell is suspended indefinitely as far as for medical reasons. But another fight coming up right before Joseph Parker's, I know his friend Deontay Wilder fighting Tyson Fury. How do you see that fight going?
Look, I got to know Tyson Fury really well, and he's polarizing. A lot of people love him, a lot of people hate him. I like him. He's an honest man. Like, he speaks the truth about the truth in himself, and he admits his demons and his shortcomings. And for him to balloon to that weight and then get fit again is a massive transformation. To go from depression and the various issues, and then to get that fit, it takes immense willpower and character. And he's honest about it, so he annoys a lot of people. So I'd like to see Tyson win. So my heart says Tyson, but my head, Deontay being ring fit. Tyson's hasn't had a tough fight for a long time, so my head probably says that Deontay's probably the favourite. But Tyson Fury beat Vladimir Klitschko and changed the heavyweight division. And we can all thank, in a way, Tyson Fury for getting rid of Klitschko, and now it's opened it all up and made it interesting again. So I don't think you can write Tyson off. He might not have the most exciting style, and he'll look to tangle up Wilder there, but and if Wilder connects with one of his big shots, he can knock anyone out. But if anyone's going to keep Wilder's big shots out, it's probably the octopus Tyson Fury. So it's an intriguing matchup, and myself and Joseph Parker and Kevin will be ringside. Joseph has got to know Tyson pretty well too, so for Joseph it's a hard one because he knows them both. Me, I've only really spent time with Tyson Fury.
And like you said to me, intriguing matchup, and a lot of tension leading up to the fight. But do you think afterwards the winner will fight Anthony Joshua, someone that Joseph Parker fought this year?
I think so. Money, above all else, what drives boxing is money. And, Don King, I think it was, once said, what makes dollars makes sense. And at the end of the day, whoever wins out of Wilder and Fury, for them to fight Joshua at, say, Wembley in London, it's a astronomical cash pile, and so self-interest will drive a negotiation. There might be a bit of over and back, but personally I think the winner of that fight will fight Anthony Joshua in the coming year.
And do you think right now Anthony Joshua is the best heavyweight, like he's regarded as?
Yes. And I don't think he's an all-time great or up there with Lennox Lewis or Klitschko by any means yet. But if you look at what he's achieved, he's strung together a perfect record of victories, and he's beaten guys like Alexander Povetkin, like Joseph Parker, Takam. Wilder too has that record, but he's not really beaten the same calibre of opponents as Joshua. And then you've got Tyson Fury, who beat Klitschko, but Fury's been, off the scene for a while. So I think on paper you have to say right now Anthony Joshua is the best heavyweight in the world and the man to beat.